Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's nice out again, so I'm doing the presentation from outside of my back deck. Today we're going to go into the nervous system, get into like the first kind of introduction to the nervous system. And in order to kind of first start talking about the nervous system, we need to talk about a little bit about the evolution of the nervous system, or the progression of the nervous system. To be considered living, right, you need to respond to the environment. So, even simple bacteria respond to the environment. However, bacteria don't have a nervous system. To have a nervous system, you need to be multicellular, right? System involves a lot of complex components. So, as you start going from unicellular into multicellular organisms, start going into the animal world, we start looking at certain animal phyla. Right, and the phyla are just next level of classification. And one phyla that we can look at are cnidarians. Cnidarians are these guys right here. So these hydra or jellyfish would be in that same phyla as well. Now, they do have a very, very primitive nervous system, and their nervous system is kind of known as a nerve net. And what that means is it means that they really just have a collection of neurons just surrounding their body, or just spread out around their body. Different than us, right? We have components of our nervous system. We have a central nervous system, which is a highly dense region where we have our brain and our spinal cord, and then we have nerves and neurons extending from there. This is just like a collection of neurons. There's no real central nervous system here. Okay. Now, what happens is, as organisms start to become more complex, as animals start to become more complex, you have this process known as cephalization take place. Cephalization is really kind of this term right here. It's really just kind of the formation of a head region. So what starts to happen is you start to go from, symmetrically, if you look this kind of, or you think of a jellyfish, right? Jellyfish is kind of a radial symmetry. I could divide a jellyfish like a pizza from above. As you start kind of getting more complex, even simple organisms like flatworms, Platyhelminthes would be their phyla, even these real simple organisms start to kind of develop this concentrated region of nerve endings. And that's basically the formation of a brain, a very primitive brain, but a brain. So what happened with this is, you think of a jellyfish kind of being radial symmetry, kind of cut like a pizza. Here, once you start having a head region, it really goes from radial to bilateral. So this division here, I can really just divide it into left and right side, like us. Like we are bilateral symmetry. You can divide it to left side, right side. Can't divide it up and down evenly, right? It doesn't really work that way. So what's happening is this process of cephalization. And cephalization is just the concentration of nerve endings in a central nervous system, in a head-like region. So obviously, cephalization has begun here with these flatworms, going with bilateral symmetry, but you get more and more cephalization as you move up and up through the animal world. And then as you get higher up, you get even more cephalization, like us, a very formal brain region. Okay, so that's kind of the progression of a nervous system. Kind of follows the concept of cephalization, and really kind of follows the concept of body plan. Right, body plan, as you go bilateral symmetry, you're now looking to be more cephalized. All right. So when we talk about our nervous system, it's really kind of an input-output type situation. And there's some key components here. So let's just kind of break it down into two key regions of our nervous system. We have our central nervous system here, which is your CNS. I'll move this up here. Right, which is your CNS. Right down here, that involves your brain and your spinal cord. You have your peripheral nervous system, which are all of the neurons extending out away from your brain and spinal cord, from your CNS. That's the PNS, peripheral nervous system. Neurons are one-way streets. They simply relay information. They relay impulses. They're electrical impulses that we'll get into in the next lesson. But they're really one-way streets. So some neurons are kind of tracked in a way that they're a one-way street coming in. And other neurons are tracked in a way that they're a one-way street going out. If you are tracked as a one-way street coming in, you're essentially bringing in information. So that's going to be a sensory neuron. So it's like sensory input, something connected to like your auditory canal, vision, touch, heat, thermoreceptors, taste buds, chemoreceptors in your mouth. All of these are sensory neurons, sensory input. Now, what you do is you process things and you send responses out, right? You move, you react. So those neurons kind of in one-way street going out of your body are more motor output, motor neurons. And they're going to attach to effector cells. So effector cells are cells that we can cause action in. The one that makes the most sense are muscles. Muscles are effector cells, but glands are also effector cells, right? To secrete sweat or something like that. Those are also effector cells. So looking a little bit further, here's our central nervous system, again, kind of comprised of the brain and spinal cord. The central nervous system relays messages, processes information, analyzes information, right? What are we doing, right? We are sending messages out. If you're moving your hands, if you're thinking, if you're talking, right? Those actions are originating in your brain, in your central nervous system, and those actions are being transmitted out. Also in your central nervous system, you're processing all of the sensory information that comes in. Your peripheral nervous system is everything outside the CNS, and those are like where your receptors are, where the effectors are, effector muscles that your motor or sensory neurons are connecting to. Okay, so again, our nervous system, right? Our sensory, our motor, we kind of mentioned those terms already. Effector cells, we mentioned that, muscles, glands. And when we talk about divisions of our nervous system, we have the CNS and PNS, but we also have other ways we can divide it. And we can divide up our nervous system into what's considered a somatic nervous system and an autonomic nervous system. Auto, meaning automatic, means kind of like it's not really under your control. Somatic is something you can control. So when you move your arm, when you talk, when you wave, when you say peace, right? All of that's part of the somatic nervous system. Those are the actions that you have conscious control over. We also have our autonomic nervous system. This is unconscious control. So unconscious control would be, sorry, I'm recording a video. My family is deciding to come outside. The autonomic nervous system is when we have unconscious control. Unconscious control would be like your heart rate, peristalsis, the rhythmic contractions of your digestive tract, moving food through your digestive tract. That's all part of the autonomic nervous system. So when we think somatic nervous system, we should think of skeletal muscle, right? That's all something we have conscious control of. When you think autonomic nervous system, you can think smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is what surrounds your digestive tract, what surrounds your capillaries and blood vessels, right? If I say right now, can you please dilate your eyes? You can't dilate your eyes. Now, you could look at a light to dilate your eyes, but that's not a direct action. If I said you need to dilate your blood vessels or constrict your blood vessels, right, you can't do that automatic with conscious control. It's part of the autonomic nervous system. Okay. With the autonomic nervous system, it's pretty simplistic. We're going to do one of two things. We're either going to speed things up or we're going to slow things down. Okay. So what we have in the autonomic nervous system, we have the sympathetic action, which is the speeding things up. And then we have the parasympathetic action, which is the process of slowing things down. So with the sympathetic, you can kind of think of the fight or flight response, right? You're walking down the street, a bear jumps out from around the building. Obviously, you're going to get an elevated heart rate. You're going to be ready to either fight the bear or to run. Fight or flight response is essentially what that's referring to. So what happens with that? Well, if you're going to fight or you're going to run, we need to start getting energy to your muscles, right? So increased heart rate, increased breathing rate brings oxygen, more cellular respiration, right? All that kind of stuff. Right? We need a fuel source, so your liver starts converting glycogen, right? Storage for glucose, right? Polysaccharide converts it into glucose, which can be used directly by your mitochondria. Bronchi of your lungs are dilating, right? Increasing gas exchange, right? Causing, more air to get in, allowing that carbon dioxide to get out. And then also adrenaline. Like, so with your kidneys, you have epinephrine, norepinephrine, and they're part of your adrenal glands, which are located just above your kidneys. Makes sense because your kidneys, all blood flows through your kidneys, so it's a good entry point to get a hormone into your system. So the adrenal glands are located just above your kidneys and pumping adrenaline in your system, which gets you going. So all of this is part of the sympathetic, right? Getting energy, getting you ready to go. The interesting thing about this is the one thing that really shuts down with this is digestion, right? Digestion is an energetic process. It requires energy to really digest your food. So when you get into a fight or flight response, digestion essentially shuts down because they don't want to waste energy in digesting food. You're not going to get enough energy from food at that moment to kind of get energy to help you survive, right? So digestion shuts down. You're really stuck with the energy you have in your system, the stored energy, the stored glycogen that's converted to glucose. Now, once we speed it up, we then need to slow it back down. So that's where the parasympathetic system comes in, right? It just opposes it, right? It calms your body down, decreases heart rate, decreases breathing, right? And then reverses digestion. So shutting it down, it starts to get a digestion moving again. Okay. Now, this is really the last two things we're going to talk about is really the neuron, right? So the functional unit, the functional cell of your nervous system is a neuron, nerve cells. There's the different types. We're going to kind of just generalize right here, but neuron has some key components. It has a cell body, has these things, dendrites. Dendrites are sensory parts of the neuron, so it means the dendrites are bringing information in. Has the axon, that's where the information is being relayed out, because again, they're one-way streets. They also have this sheathing. Many of them have this sheathing that's kind of formed by this myelin. It's called a myelin sheath, which is formed by cells known as Schwann cells. And then a cluster of neurons is called a ganglia, just a good little vocab word. So if we look at this here, here's your neuron. You can kind of see the cell body here. And that cell body can take in information from the outside world or take in information from other neurons, right? Neurons connect to other neurons. They connect this communication pathway. So how this works is dendrites here, or the cell body, is taking information in, and then it's relaying information out through the axon and through the axon terminals. Okay. And we'll talk a lot about that action later on. Some neurons can be very long. So when they're sending this electrical impulse, and they literally do send this electrical impulse, many of the longer neurons have this, not many, most of our neurons have this myelin sheath. So this is like a conductive material that surrounds the axon. So what that does, it helps to speed up the rate of that impulse, right, to make it even faster. When we look at our neurons, we really kind of talk about them in terms of their synapse. The synapse is the connection between one neuron and the next. So here's our synapse right here, and here's our axon terminal button, right, connecting kind of a portion of a dendrite there. And here's a picture of it blown out. So here's the axon terminal button, right, and here's the part of the dendrite or cell body on that next neuron. So we call this region here the synapse. So just for terminology's sake, right, this neuron here is before the synapse. So we call this the presynaptic neuron, or the presynaptic cell, which makes this one after the synapse. This is the postsynaptic neuron, or the postsynaptic cell. Information is coming in through the dendrites, going out through the axon. So this system is working from the left top to the bottom right. Right, in the postsynaptic neuron and the presynaptic neuron. Now, yes, we have electrical impulses. Electrical impulses will travel down through a neuron, but one neuron doesn't necessarily send electrical charge to the next neuron. They have to communicate using chemical communication, not really electrical communication. And the chemicals they use to communicate, which we'll talk about a lot later, are these chemicals known as neurotransmitters. You've probably heard that term before. Neurotransmitters, like dopamine, it would be a good example of a neurotransmitter. So neurotransmitter chemicals that are released from one neuron that communicate to the next neuron to fire, to send the impulse. And you kind of see they are leaving the axon terminal button of the presynaptic neuron, traveling across the synapse and attaching to receptors, which aren't shown here, but they're going to be receptors here on the postsynaptic neuron, relaying that impulse. We'll talk a lot about this connection later on. We'll talk a lot about neurotransmitters and that action there. The one last thing I'm going to talk about in this class is just like the simplest action response or sensory and then motor response. It's known as a reflex arc. So you kind of picture this right here. You're walking, you're in class, not really paying attention, right? Some goofball behind you takes a tack and sticks a tack in your hand. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to pull your hand away immediately because you got pricked in your finger. Now, in that action, you don't go, what the heck just happened? I feel like somebody just jabbed a tack in my hand. Maybe I should pull my hand away so it doesn't hurt it anymore. That's not how it works, right? Your hand is automatically, it's a reflex, and you're automatically pulling away. So what happens with this is you have this stimulus, touching a hot stove, not knowing it's on, touching a sharp object that somebody pricks you with, right? And that information is relayed in with a sensory neuron. Now, it comes into your spinal cord. This isn't your brain, this is just your spinal cord. Now, once it comes into your spinal cord, it gets integrated into what's known as an interneuron. Interneurons are just connective neurons. You can kind of see it in green right here. And when that happens, the signal is going to be split. It's going to send the signal up to your brain for processing, for you to go, what the heck just happened? Somebody just jabbed a tack in my hand. And it's also going to relay that message directly out a motor neuron to your effector cells, so to a muscle. So you're literally going to be pulling your hand away without really processing that information in your brain. And this is just one of the simplest types of responses known as a reflex arc. And it's just a good one to know about. That's it for this lesson. Just a quick introduction to the nervous system. Next lesson, we're going to go into a decent amount of detail, talking about how impulses are sent, talk about like resting potential and action potential, and how the synapse functions. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye.